we grow and learn also when we are a bit out of our comfort zone. And I had certain challenges I needed to find a way to obviously surpass, and that's when the growth happened. You know, when they say ignorance is bliss,
Yeah.
if somebody told me, you know, what it would take. And so I decided to actually meet with every single scientist in the organization.
Oh, wow.
Remember I did the first 100 in my first 100 day in the job
Oh my
because I
God.
wanted to have the kind of cool goal. My heart was, in the US. I was thinking about how to move, but my brain was, rationalizing and telling me, well, you want to make the change right time. When I am in my flow, I have a very clear alignment from my head to my heart. I know exactly what is my direction and my trajectory, and that makes me very successful.
Okay, so today we have a very special guest, the Chief of Staff at Genentech, Lena, and let me know if I'm pronouncing your last name right.
Facchini.
Facchini.
Ileana Facchini, yes.
She was gracious enough to, do a little talk with me a little while ago. My mom had met or seen you talk, and she sent me the video.
When you enter a career, so somebody who is a young adult, right, a young adult woman, first it's about finding the ambition, the aspiration, the dream, right? And so learn about how things are done, and learn about the career path, and learn about the context, the industry, etc. So first is about finding that kind of balance. As far as speaking up, so my advice would be, being authentic is obviously important in the day-to-day. At the same time, it's a fact that in a corporation, there are also certain rules, sometimes unspoken rules. So you want to pick your battles, right, very well. So so having a sense of curiosity and also giving the self-doubt, right, meaning like not everything is against what you're trying to achieve or what you're doing, or your opinion should definitely be learned and listened. But I would invite other people to a dialogue, perhaps, especially at the beginning. It's a very open question, right? So it depends on the context. So I witness at senior leadership, when you're at the table with the C-level leaders, you may want to be diplomatic and choose the right venue to express your obviously perhaps a disagreement, or find a different way, different moment to express something that is different. As far as your own project, your own career, I think it's important to be authentic, but also allow time to show if that is what the person is passionate about or not, especially if the person is just entering your career. Happy to chat offline further if you have a specific example, otherwise I'm risking to be too vague in my response. So, thank you. Sure, biotech is evolving very rapidly. I would say the entire world is evolving very rapidly. And the biotech, there's, in addition to AI, real world data, big data, there is, and a healthcare system that has its challenges and regulations that keep changing, evolving, and there are additional struggles. So it's a very complex industry. Plus new competition and new models, right, for selling drugs and therapies directly to patients. So what are the qualities that I think that are imperative for any leader to survive? So there are many, but I would pick two that are very dear to my heart. One is being a visionary. And being a visionary means that you are a leader in an organization that is global, in my case, and you are the person who's going to help others to navigate the change and help others to come together and follow and go from one place to another one. But secondly, being a catalyst that goes along with being a visionary. If you're unable to communicate and send a message, convey a message that resonates with people, with audiences in different geography, in different parts of our planet, you can't succeed. And being a catalyst means being able to create a momentum and create a movement. And organizations like Genentech, which is part of the Roche Pharma group, there is a fatigue about the change. Changes are coming from every single aspect, as I mentioned, compliance, legal, regulatory, technology, AI, etc. So for a leader to succeed, what I witness and what I personally embrace in me is trying to be a visionary that is constantly standing in front of people, trying to bring them along, and being a catalyst in creating that movement and momentum in the organization. Thank you.
I was kind of like inspired by seeing you talk about your career and stuff. So yeah, I think one of the first questions we had was, so having spent a significant amount of time, a lot of time at Genentech, how has your international experience shaped your career? What advice would you give to someone seeking to develop like a global career in biotech or pharma?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Justin, for having me today. So, yes, I'm very pleased that since I moved from Italy to the United States about 21 years ago, I always had roles that were sort of global, not only Genentech and Roche, but prior to joining Genentech in 2014. There is something that's really fascinating about being in roles that have a global perspective, a global scope, because you end up interacting with different not only functions, but geography, cultures, ways of working. It does add the complexity to anything you're doing, but I personally love that kind of challenge. And I have a personal interest and also affections to learning about different cultures. So, couple of things. Suggestion for individuals who are interested in having an international career. First of all, is obviously being open and interested in connecting within their current organization if they have obviously offices elsewhere. Getting to know obviously people, accepting or proposing international assignments. It's another way. Personally, I literally moved from one country to the other. It's not always feasible, but there are also corporation. Roche is one, where you can apply to roles in different country, and then you move there, and the organization helps you obviously in the onboarding and so forth. I love the global scale, the global perspective, and international aspect because it's really interesting about working also with people with so many different, perspective, observations, way of working. As I mentioned earlier, can be challenging, but I found it very intriguing as well.
What was it like moving from one country to another? Was it like a,
Uh,
'cause I can imagine it was a big like culture shock.
Yeah, when they say ignorance is bliss,
Oh yeah.
if somebody told me, what you would take, also learning about the bureaucracy, or for example, I moved to the US that I was already an adult and I had my driver license in Italy, but here is not accepted that when you move permanently. So you really have to restart establishing yourself and then getting to know the different ways of interacting and way people build their friendship. It's been more than a cultural shock, but it's been also a very important choice I made in life that I will never regret.
Because you learn like, oh, besides just work, like people just interact differently. They're different like customs,
Very.
like reading people and stuff.
Very, I mean, the level of formality is different, especially, West Coast, but also coming from a country, Italy, that's very formal, that there are also gender role. They are very,
Oh
very
yeah, yeah.
strict. But also the opportunities, especially in an area like San Francisco Bay Area, has been truly overwhelming, so different from Italy. It really changed my life, and it helped me become honestly an international citizen, a citizen of the world. I mean, I have friends in the UK, in France, in Italy, in Switzerland, the US, in Canada, in Mexico. I mean, who knew that this would be even possible? I love that. I absolutely love that.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. And for the second question, I know we talked a little bit about, um, building things from the ground up. You've built a lot of things from the ground up. And what is it like kind of overcoming self-doubt? Because you mentioned the importance of having a little bit to keep you grounded, but
Yeah.
can you share what it's like maybe having a big task? I remember you mentioned, someone's like delegated you like a big task in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
So, yes, self-doubt. I mean, this has a lot to do also with the personality of the individual, right? So, if you do different personality assessment, one is the Myers-Briggs, for example. I am in the INFJ, so I'm an introvert. I have certain personality traits, and you learn more about yourself. So the self-doubt is something that's part of me, and honestly will never go away, but I've learned to use it in a positive manner, so it keeps me grounded, because it's very easy when you grow in your career to sort of become the expert, and that brings sometimes even subconsciously a bit of either arrogance or sense of entitlement. This is something that happens pretty regularly. We're also human beings, but every time you join a new position, a new role, a new team, it's really good to reflect and position yourself properly. And the self-doubt, especially in my opinion, in the beginning, is about really asking yourself, like, is this the right approach for this group, for this team, for this project? Now, going to the extreme, people often reflect or talk about the imposter syndrome, which is, can become also a bit paralyzing for somebody who's trying to also grow in their career. I don't think I've ever experienced that to that extent. I always felt I had a strong sponsorship and mentorship joining new teams and organizations. So this brings me to what is important. Using the self-doubt also to establish your role, your position within a team, organization, as well as your credibility. I think it's very important, because every time you interact with people, you want to make sure that you are well accepted, integrated, and also your voice and your messages can obviously have an impact in the organization.
how do you go about sort of like making sure that your voice is kind of like heard, but then also, especially in like a new, because you've had a lot of different positions, what has it been like maybe being at like a new place and maybe wanting to speak out sometimes, but it might be difficult?
So that brings the topic of self-awareness. So I've done, when in organization like Genentech and Roche, when you become a director, senior director, they certainly invest a lot in you in terms of also a potential leader. And to grow as a leader, they want to make sure you invest in your self-awareness. So I became very self-aware about, how am I perceived by others? Again, I'm also somebody who comes from a different country, I have a different way of speaking, interacting. Obviously, I've been successful also Genentech Roche, but it's good to have often the kind of a reflection, and a coach, for example, can help you with that. So establishing, for example, like making sure that my voice is heard. As I mentioned earlier, I usually, when I take a new role or I have a new project, I really spend time thinking about how I'm going to position myself. What is my role in that specific project? What leadership is needed of me in that specific meeting or interactions? Am I there to drive, to be the leader who is the visionary, or am I there to coach employees, empower them, and make sure they can move forward? Am I there to create momentum and be a catalyst in connecting different stakeholders and functions? So that self-doubt, as well as that process of thinking about how you're going to position yourself in a new job, it gives you clarity. And it's an important practice that I honestly apply every time also I join a new teams. Also within the same job, you can actually have different roles. And so that's very important. And then as far as having your voice heard, that's all about executive presence, learning to, how to pose questions or powerful question, how to coach or help people to see there are other opportunities. It's never giving just the answer and the solution to every question. It's really leading through others and making sure that your voice is also, amplified also, across organizations, especially if you have other leaders obviously supporting you and championing what you're doing.
Hmm. That's interesting. And I liked how you mentioned you kind of think about what you're gonna need to be asked to do in a role, and then you kind of almost like pick and choose, like, oh, okay, I might need to mentor people more, or I
Yeah.
might need to be more like giving people more instructions, or
Absolutely. So, for example, with the first time I took the role of chief of staff, I was reporting to the senior vice president of product development, clinical science. He had about 250 scientists reporting to me, and I'm not a scientist. And so one
Yeah.
of my biggest thing was the beginning. I need to make sure that people get to know me. People see the contribution I'm bringing to the table that are not scientific contribution. They understand my job as chief of staff because often is interpreted in different ways. And so I decided to actually meet with every single scientist in the organization.
Oh, wow.
Remember the first I did the first 100 in my first 100 day in the job
Oh my
because I
God.
wanted to have the kind of cool goal
Wow.
setting. And that allowed me to open the communication with all of them and also make sure they would see me as somebody part of the group and not just an isolated tower sending emails and so forth. So every time you choose a different approach, but I think if you do it with intent and sense of purpose, you can be really impactful.
Hmm. That must have been like a lot. Did you ever feel like, or I'm curious, how did you even set that up? Did you like
No,
do it all at
I'm
once, or like each week was like you're trying to get the spot filled for 100? 'Cause that's
Well,
like,
yes. So first of all, we're in 2021. So we're still in that kind of semi-pandemic mode where we're all working from home. So no matter what, I needed to schedule Zoom call with people. And because there was no commuting time, there were no other activities, we had in the calendar a bit of extra time. So I basically took the roster of, employees and basically just scheduled it. And, today with the Google, we use Google email at Genentech and Roche. And so it's very easy through Google calendars to
oh yeah.
see everybody availability and making the event modifiable. So sometimes, in a week, I would actually meet with even like 8 or 10 people. So sometimes it was a bit overwhelming. At the same time, I was so thirsty of learning from them, and I was so interested in making sure that I would not become an outsider inside the group of scientists. I wanted to be integrated and accepted as one of them, right? As well as being very respectful of the fact that they do amazing science and they really work to save people's life. And that was one of probably the best decision I made, to be honest. That gave me a very quickly a sense of belonging to a new group, a new team, and meeting people virtually, onboarding a new organization virtually can be really tough. And that actually helped me, especially open the communication channels with so many people at once.
Hmm. And just one last, because I'm really curious about
Yes.
that. Was this a goal you set like when you got the position, or was it something you've been thinking about for a
With,
while?
yeah, no, actually, after I got the position and so was onboarding, I basically developed my knowledge board, right? So I'm not a scientist and I joined an organization of scientists. My
Mhm.
job as a chief of staff was very clear in terms of what I needed to deliver, but still doesn't mean I need to understand the function. I need to be able to follow conversation. And so in building my knowledge board, I created basically sort of a project plan on the different topics I needed to learn quickly. So drug development, the pipeline for immunology or for neuroscience, ophthalmology, infectious disease, gastroenterology, nephrology, etc. So in doing that, I needed to talk also with the stakeholders, right? And I made myself vulnerable, saying, well, I need to learn about clinical science. This is my plan. And if you are available for a quick conversation, I have a few questions and would like to understand more. So in that process, I thought, you know what? I can study all that is available about clinical science, but the reality is a chief of staff, you need to understand the people who are part of the organization. And given that we were in this pandemic mode, that we were working remotely, and people were dispersed, geographically in different countries, said, why not? I mean, sure, it's just a matter of scheduling and finding the time, but it was not 1,000 people, it's 100. It's it's not impossible. And most importantly, I really wanted to make sure I would do everything I could to learn about the people I was sort of serving through the leader, obviously, that I was working with.
Yeah. That's interesting because it's important to kind of like show that you're more than just like you mentioned, like an email or so or
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So for me, as a chief of staff, it's very easy that chief of staff becomes this. Sometimes people see them as the spy of the leader that goes to meeting, or somebody who speaks on behalf of the leader or act on behalf of the leader. Yes, of course. I mean, chief of staff needs to help a leader in being even more successful than they are, and but at the same time, we also bring our own perspective, personality, and we are great influencers. So the more I got to know the audience and the people part of the function, the better I could actually advise my leader on how to, for example, even speak or present a new topic at the next town hall or department meetings, right? So, and most importantly, I wanted to become the eyes and the ear on the floor, if you know what I mean. And the only way to do it is if people know who you are and you literally open that communication channel. You just send an email saying, I'm available if you need to talk. Instead of be curious about people, get to know them, and make sure they get to know you and they ask you their questions. So
yeah. And that reminds me, last time you mentioned how sometimes you might have been responsible for like, oh, it's some admin emailing you and saying, hey, can you go check on this person to, they need to get something done. And it might,
yeah,
I can imagine it must have made it a little bit easier for you since you
yeah.
had like seen people or
Yeah,
talked to people
absolutely,
before.
absolutely. And sometimes, in the office, it's like in with family members. Sometimes you just have to text them or reach out to them or just see them at the coffee machine, say, "Hey, can you please send me the documents?" Because, so that's important. And it's important, as I mentioned, to also make sure that you nurture those connections. Sometimes it takes just a 5 minutes chat to have an alignment versus just email or newsletters or surveys and so forth. And chief of staff needs to be visible as much as the leader and approachable.
Hmm. Well, that kind of ties in a little bit to the next question.
Yeah.
How did you develop some of these qualities? I know you talked a little bit about mentorship
Mhm.
and like leadership development. I think you emphasize the importance of having mentors to sponsor you in your career. So
Yeah. So
mentors influence your leadership style.
Well,
Yeah.
so no, that's a good question. So so when I was younger, even when I was, in college and then through my MBA, I always had the ambition to become one day, a leader, a senior leader in a large corporation. So when I was, junior in my career, I was obviously thirsty. I use this word on purpose because I was constantly trying to get more information. So, well, for sure, I was reading books about leadership. I was reading articles. Like I often still read Harvard Business Reviews. There is an article that from few years ago, so it's a bit old, but still so relevant. The title is What Do Leaders Do? The difference between leadership and management. And then, you read the theoretical aspect, but in the day-to-day in the office, you can just compare and say, oh, I see. I mean, these are some of the leadership characteristics. I had good managers, I had bad managers, and I had incredible leaders who truly invested on me. So everything is experience. Those who truly invested on me and my talent, obviously, they helped me flourish and grow so much quicker and faster. I have to say that to me, leadership is about being you, being yourself. So you bring your core value system, your personality. So, for example, we often talk about leadership aspects such as being a visionary, being a catalyst, being a coach. To me, for example, is also generosity. And we rarely talk about, leaders are supposed to be generous. Absolutely. Meaning like, being available to their employees, being available for mentorship, advice, and helping them. And this is something that it's, often we don't discuss. We use some other, business words for the case. So managers, leaders truly invest in me. And through the leaders who truly invest in me, I had the opportunity also to work with a very senior executive coach. And she was somebody that I worked with her for about, I don't know, 2, 3 years. And she's been working with C-levels across the Silicon Valley and the US. So I had the opportunity to learn with somebody that is, somebody very well established in the industry that's been working with even CEOs of larger pharma companies. And that's been an incredible leadership journey and development. Now, that's not always available because it's obviously a significant investment, but there are also career coaches. For example, we have a career lab at Genentech. So I also had meetings with the career coaches in terms of learning how to do informational conversation and networking. But the real, let's say, growth in terms of development was for me with the direct experience when I was working with the senior vice president. He truly invested in me and empowered me and gave me so much authority and opportunities to move forward with large initiatives. That was really incredible because we grow and learn also when we are a bit out of our comfort zone. And I had certain challenges I needed to find a way to obviously surpass, and that's when the growth happened.
So you kind of had to step outside of what felt nice to you to like reach your full potential.
Well, for example, speaking truth to power, it's easy said, but it's not easy to do. But when you're put in a position where you have a certain authority, you also have to practice and be able to do it. Because if you are a leader driving specific, obviously, initiatives, and you are at the table with other senior leaders, you need to learn to be also an independent thinker, an autonomous leader, bringing your perspective in a way that can be obviously impactful, being also able to advise senior leaders if, for example, their conclusions are incorrect or could be wrong. So those are things you can read about, you can study, you can get a book and an article, but when you practice them, that's pretty powerful.
What was it like when you had sort of the difficult scenarios of having to advise someone who you realize they might need like some correction, or they might have been wrong about something? Was that difficult to sort of learn how to do?
Yeah, I don't think it was difficult. So a couple of things. First, when I moved to the United States, I was not as fluent as I am today in English. English will always be my second or third language. So there is a bit of that. But luckily, working in an organization that it's a global international company, I constantly work with people who are speaking their second language. So first of all, there's this component. That's always important. This is always in my mind. The second thing is learning how to ask the question, right? So a feedback is an opinion, and you often are in meetings where somebody does not like or appreciate what you are proposing. So be curious about it. So you can ask, okay, I see your point. So how would you suggest we proceed? How do you think this other opportunity could be? So there are techniques where you can learn more about the feedback given, also invite to a broader conversation, but also where you can also go back and say, well, I appreciate your feedback, your inputs. However, because of this reason, I think we should proceed this way. As far as influencing, sometimes it doesn't happen in a meeting. Sometimes it happens before the meeting, and you want to build a network of champions for whatever initiatives you're driving. So there are many, many, many techniques. And again, you can study or learn them and find them in articles or TED Talks, but it's really in the practice that's where you can learn how to do it. And I'm still learning.
Yeah. And it's interesting how you mentioned sort of like asking more questions. It's like almost assuming the best and just wanting to learn more from what the person might have been saying, and kind of like staying on the same team.
Yeah. So I remember that I had also a communication coach. So when you start delivering presentations on stage in front of very large audiences, you definitely want to get some help from a communication coach that can help you also with your executive presence, the tone of voice, how to use silence, right? Those sort of things. And this communication coach told me that once he delivered the presentation to an audience of 500 people, and somebody from the audience took the mic and said, "This is absolutely wrong. It's terrible. I disagree." And he was on stage and he said, he turned red in the face, but then he said, "Tell me more."
Mm.
It's very difficult when you get the feedback, especially in front of an audience so large. How do you respond? And he was quick and says, "Tell me more." So invite into the conversation. And then ideally, compromising or seeing if there is an opportunity to influence more.
Mm. So yeah, just really like asking for more information before you kind of like
Yeah.
immediately determine that. Yeah. Cool. So the next question I had was something we talked about a little bit, but I just wanted to hear your general thoughts about like AI in
Mm.
biotech and biopharma and how much you see it already building up right now, if it's impacting areas like regulatory affairs or clinical trials, and do you see it trending in a certain direction right now?
Yes. Yes to everything. Yeah, currently, there are so many internal initiatives to make sure that every employee, as well as contractors working in Genentech and Roche, comes up to speed with AI. There are initiatives at global level, in the different geographies, because of course there are also some legal aspect that we have to obviously respect. There are mandatory training, there are workshops, there are newsletters. We currently have access, so we have our own ChatGPT inside Roche, but we also now have access to Google Gemini. There are different teams and different groups and functions that are specifically assigned of building the AI capabilities. So, for example, we have an AI Academy. We have the Digital Technology Officer that launched an AI initiative that's global. Every group, every department has individuals dedicated to AI. So from HR, people and culture, finance, procurement, etc., etc. With a specific, so the impact is huge, and I don't think we are capable even understanding yet what is really the impact on AI in our industry, in our day-to-day life. So what I've seen, what I know about obviously AI in clinical science and drug development is there are actually many tech company, startup, but also large established tech organizations that have started their AI in drug development, in clinical trials. There are some that have reached very, very large numbers of fundings and fundraising efforts. They're looking obviously at trying to shorten the time frame for clinical trials, because we all know it takes years and years and years. So when it comes to, for example, data management, predictive analysis, when it's about generating synthetic data and insight, optimizing trial design, improving imaging analysis. These are all areas obviously fundamental. Plus, as we know, clinical trials needs to also deliver a lot of paperwork, and you'd have to meet a lot of, let's say, milestones with the different regulatory authorities everywhere in the plant, right? So if we're looking at Europe or the US with the FDA, so anytime there is some sort of paperwork, obviously there is an opportunity for us to use AI to make sure that we can do the same task and complete the same task in a much, much faster way, and hopefully also even more efficient. So automating submissions, for example, enhancing regulatory intelligence, improving compliance, facilitating data management, optimizing regulatory pathways. I don't have a visibility on every single effort across organization, but as you can imagine, is massive. It's really massive. The challenge with obviously the pharma companies like Roche and Genentech, we are very big. We're about 100,000 employees. It's just that sometimes these big changes are a bit slow compared to the smaller biotech pharma, all the giant technology companies. But AI is going to have obviously huge contribution. So we are trying to also work on the culture, making sure people open their mind and see AI as a tool that's going to enable us to do certain tasks faster, so then we can actually focus on the more strategic as well as critical, obviously, initiatives across the company.
I'm curious, has it impacted you like directly in any way in terms of kind of you receiving like some either an AI's like work or you having to like use one to send it? So what has that been like for you, like managing that?
Yeah. So in my day-to-day as a chief of staff, I write a lot of communications also for leaders, right? So one thing is to write an email, another thing is to actually write opening remarks or speeches for leaders who are invited to, a town hall or conferences, et cetera, et cetera. Now, most of the time, these leaders obviously have their own agenda in terms of topics, but I've always been drafting communications and also communications that will go to entire organizations within Genentech and Roche. So, without a doubt, ChatGPT, actually the equivalent is we call Roche Chat. I've been using that because obviously it's truly an incredible tool that can really make communications faster, smoother, etc. Last week within Roche and Genentech, we were given access to Gemini. So now I'm exploring a bit Google Gemini. I'm not impacted in terms of what I do in other than benefiting from this opportunity to also revise communication and so forth through the ChatGPT sort of tools. But I'm pleased to share that in 2 days I'll start my MIT AI in Pharma and Biotech program that is sponsored by Genentech and Roche. So I will be in a 6 weeks as a full immersion sort of program. So I will be studying a lot. So we'll see from there how things will change for me as well.
Wow, is it like an after work program or is it during like you get to work and you got to start studying and
So basically, it's a hybrid approach. These are virtual classes, so I will be with other participants. So we have class sessions, but then some of the homework you can do on your own, obviously, time, which is helpful because otherwise it's difficult, with the time zone or if I have business meetings and so forth. So it's a nice sort of a hybrid approach. Will be obviously online, but I can interact with people from also other industries, but not necessarily industry because they're primarily pharma and biotech, but from other company, they are going to do this AI program. It's for leaders in pharma and biotech. So that is more appropriate for me in terms of what I need to do and how I can move forward. A lot of the things I need to do actually, or I'm working on, is the activation of change because we need to work on the cultures, the behaviors, making sure people are embracing obviously AI and the different new tools that we are going to roll out.
So it's like important for not only you, but for other people, like making sure that they're
Everybody.
up to date and using it correctly. Yeah.
Everybody. It's a massive change for organizations to go through. Some people are fearful, some people are resistant to change. I think it's part of being human beings. Some people are dismissive, oh, this will go away. But we've seen it so many times. I mean, the typical comment I share is there were not radiologists before X-rays were invented. We all use Androids or iPhones, but only a few years ago, people were using Blackberries, right? So it's about embracing technology and progress to enable us to do even better our work or shifting to more strategic initiatives as well.
Yeah. And another question I had was I remember in our last chat you talked about how you were like an introspective person. and how that's kind of been a part of you, who you are. And I wanted to ask, do you have any sort of like system set in place, like every like new position or something, or oh, I want to check on myself, like, am I doing well? How am I doing like mentally as well?
Yeah.
Like I'm learning, improving,
Yeah, it's we never stop learning about ourselves. Every time you're in maybe in similar situations, but then you're different as a person because we grow, we learn, etc. So, yes, indeed, I'm an introvert. I enjoy obviously interactions, connections. I love having groups of friends, etc. But I'm an introvert because I need to, first of all, I recharge by spending time thinking. I process information. I'm constantly processing information and constantly thinking about, how to do things, how to move forward, how to position myself, etc., etc. So, there are many books and also famous TED Talks that speak about the power of introvert. I think it's about managing, for me, managing my own energy. So, for example, going to the office, I go to the office 3, 4 times per week, right? Meeting also what is required. And the time in the office for me is time for meetings and frankly, socializing. I find very difficult to be in the office and deliver strategic papers or essays or thinking about strategic challenges. I do that either in the morning before I go to the office or in the afternoon when I come back from the office because I need really the quiet time. If I am in the office and I need to work something strategic, I need to find a room that's quiet where I can just be there, even if it's only half an hour, but where I can think and move things forward. So for me, it's about managing my energy, which means I'm managing my calendar appropriately. I do know when I have to do some strategic work, I just block my calendar because I needed to succeed and move things forward. It's also about, there are times where I had to be often on stage, interacting with a lot of people. I found that very, very, very tiring. So it was important for me that I would manage my evening calendar in a way that I could just have some quiet time and downtime. And then it's about allowing space for my thinking. So I go to nature, like in terms of I go for long walks. That is my own meditation, for example. Like I like to be in nature, go for long walks on my own, and just let my brain sort of process information to sort of calm down sometimes the noise that I have in me. It's a lifetime goal. I mean, we learn about ourselves through experience, and then we find ourselves to be different from who we were only like 3 years ago. Our priorities change, what we care about also change. So it's important to also listen to yourself. And lastly, something I remember very clearly when I was younger and I was in Italy and I was dreaming about moving to the United States and having an international career. I was feeling that my heart was, in the US. I was thinking about how to move, but my brain was, rationalizing and telling me, well, you want to make the change right time. And that misalignment is very difficult for me. When I am in my flow, I have a very clear alignment from my head to my heart. I know exactly what is my direction and my trajectory, and that makes me very successful. When brain and heart are not aligned, I know it's time for me to slow down, pause, reflect, and refine the alignment.
Mm. So you said when you're going to make that transition, your brain and your heart were aligned, like when you were doing that.
At the
They were
beginning, no,
aligned. Oh,
because I had the dream to move to the US, but my brain was telling me, well, how are you going to do it? You're not ready. And then there is a moment where you're just ready and things are just all aligned. So it was a very interesting process.
mm. So you kind of had to get there or have them both meet eventually, get
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
And also I wanted to ask about kind of like planning your time where you kind of lock in with more, work that's not like meetings. Um, do you plan that every week like it's a schedule? Like, oh, I need to read certain papers and reviews, or is
Mm.
it does it change every week? Do you have to like every Friday, do you have to say, okay, let me get this time in for myself, put my nature time in for my walk, and then
Yes.
yeah.
I wish, I wish. So, yes, I'm a planner. So I go through my weeks, work weeks, with my calendar. So every Sunday, I check my calendar for the week. I see which days are really, really busy. Sometimes you start meetings at 7:30 a.m., you finish at 5 p.m., and I know those days are intense. It's just for awareness. When possible, I move things around. But the reality is, things change all the time. So what is important for me is to know what are the big milestones for the month or the week. So for example, I have a couple of big workshops on April 28 and 29. That's very important that I manage well the time to prepare for those workshops. So I built in time, let's say the Friday afternoon, a couple of hours to review documentation. But then in day-to-day things change, right? Sometimes, your calendar, a couple of meetings get canceled. Say, okay, let's go for a walk. And then I come back. Now that I'm starting this MIT program, I will build in my calendar the times to do the essay, review articles, watch the videos and so forth. I mean, this approach makes me successful. I think in organization of our size, with roles that are so broad in scope, it's important to be also organized with your time and your calendar. I know there are people who are not, and they're still successful. I don't know how they do it. But yes, I try to make sure that I keep my weekly time, swimming pool versus the gym versus the walk. I try to be disciplined. Um, Last year, I was traveling a lot. The last few years, I was traveling a lot internationally. That made that very difficult, I have to say, when you're constantly on the road for work. Now that my travel schedule is much more manageable, it's easy for me to take care of myself.
Mm. And changing time zones and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there were times where I would be in Europe 4 or 5 times, multiple location, and I can't complain. I mean, Genentech and Roche, I mean, we travel very well. You have all the comfort you need, but it's a significant, obviously, amount of energy, also physical and mental, especially when you are working with 9 hours time zone difference. It can be really exhausting sometimes. So it's important that you know what you need, and then you manage that in the best way you can.
Mm. Even in like more harder scenarios where you're in like different countries all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I kind of bridging off of Genentech, I wanted to ask you, one of the things I was impressed by was you mentioned how you applied like multiple times before you ended up working at Genentech. And it shows how being persistent, not kind of backing away from something and saying, hey, I want to do this. I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna go, you said, kind of, I'm gonna go get it.
Yeah.
And ending up being successful in the end, where maybe after the third time you might have thought, oh no, but if you just kept going that one more time, you end up kind of becoming really successful,
Yeah, I think it's a lesson in life, honestly. One of my strengths is to have very clear, always what is my number one goal. Just one, and then everything else can be second, third, doesn't matter. But I knew that I wanted to try to get into Genentech. And sure, I mean, the first time you are not called for an interview, that's okay. You can apply a second time. And then, okay, you're not applying. Well, why not try the third time? Maybe you try to do networking, and then you start the interview process and maybe it doesn't go well. And then you start another. I mean, and the reality is, we are, so Genentech is obviously a very prestigious brand and has the ability to attract talents from all over the world. So you have to expect some competition. The additional element is that Genentech and Roche, they fill job openings with internal candidates like 51, 52% of the time. So your competition are actually other employees who are already in the system, which I think is an incredible value of Genentech as well, by the way. So I think in life, you can't give up. If you care about something, if you really want to achieve something, keep going. not too long ago, actually, I had the opportunity to meet a couple of astronauts, and one said that he tried for 8 years to be accepted in at the NASA as an astronaut, meaning you ideally you want to succeed the first time, but that's not what success looks like. Usually you go through a lot of failures before you are successful. So it's more for me about the clarity of what you want to achieve and how much you're willing to try and to focus. And yeah, being perseverant is important.
And I'm guessing too, it might have felt a little bit more sweet for you once you actually, got that
Oh,
position. It was like you know what you went through, going through lots of work. So
absolutely, absolutely. No, I'm personally proud of what I've accomplished, especially because each one of us brings forward their own story. And considering that I was born and raised in a small town in the north of Italy, and I was not even speaking English when I moved to the US, no, I'm really proud. Again, there are individuals who obviously had a much more impressive careers at Genentech, Roche, or other company. That's okay, but what matters is your journey and what are your dreams, aspirations, and ambitions, and you have to be willing also to work for them.
mm, yeah, yeah. And one question as well I wanted to ask you a bit about that you had touched on last time was your personal branding, because I think you mentioned it's important to have a personal brand, and I
Mhm.
feel like it's not something you like learn about when you're going through your education, since it's kind of just
Yeah.
assignments and stuff. When did you realize like, oh, I need to kind of solidify my brand. I want to be able to present myself in a certain way?
So this is a good question. So when I started my career in the US, every career coach or person was interacting with for new jobs or positions would say, "So Ileana, what is your brand?" So coming from Italy, I had no idea how to answer that. And initially I was like, "Well, it sounds such an artificial thing. What is my brand?" It took me a while, but then I got the point. The point is you need to know yourself. You need to know what are your core values, your core strengths, how you want to present them to your, manager, leader, other companies, but also be clear about what you are not, right? So, for example, my brand is about quality. I believe in obviously in a strong planning execution, but done with quality, with logical thinking. I believe in having good intent and a sense of purpose. I also am somebody who can be very diplomatic. So I love environments like a stakeholders engagement where you need to bring some diplomacy. Those are environments I actually enjoy working in. So to answer your question is at the beginning, I didn't know what was my brand. I knew I was a good employee. Knew I was somebody who's a hard worker. But knowing your brand or building your brand needs to be really about being able to also communicate your personality and leadership aspects. And for example, something that I never really expressed until a few years ago, part of my brand is actually courage. I'm a very courageous woman. I mean, I moved on my own without knowing anybody in the US, 21 years ago. And I parachuted myself in a completely different context and country and new organization, learning how to work in an American corporation. Like I come from Italy, we work in a different way. So there is the aspect of me that I am intrigued by what is far. I am comfortable in stepping into the unknown. I'm comfortable in not knowing anything about something and conquering the knowledge. And so, when a few years ago I completed my leadership circle profile, it's called LCP. It's actually a leadership assessment that looks at your leadership characteristics from a reactive and creative manner. My courageous authenticity at the highest score.
Oh, okay.
And so I never presented myself to anybody. Oh, my name is Ileana. I'm very courageous. I didn't realize that, but actually, it's part of my brand because I am. I'm a risk taker. And I've done it many, many, many times. It's just I never communicate that. So going back to the brand, I don't like to build a brand. The brand needs to be about you.
Yeah.
And so what are your characteristics, how you present to somebody, especially when you send a resume and a cover letter, these elements, like, yeah, delivering with quality, it's easy to put in a resume, but being a courageous person, I mean, this is something that only verbally you can really elaborate and express.
Mm. Just kind of like being authentic to yourself and just thinking about who am I? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. In this regard, I have to say, also going back to your other questions, the leadership circle profile was probably one of the most comprehensive assessments I've done. We did also with my leadership team at the time. So it's really good for teams to get to know each other because really it creates this comprehensive view of the person. And so you learn about your interpersonal skills and ability to achieve results, your courageous authenticity, etc., etc. So that was a very valuable exercise we did.
Mm. What was it called? The leadership circle exercise?
Pro- Profile.
Profile.
Leadership Circle Profile, LCP. It's a trademark. I'm sure you can find on Google. And companies like Genentech and Roche, we have our internal coaches. So every time we have a leadership teams, they're newly formed, we bring in a coach to help the teams getting to know themselves as individuals as well as a collective leadership team. It's a very powerful assessment. There are many, there are many assessments. But this one, in my opinion, was probably the best one I've personally experienced with.
Mm. And is that also where you got the courage? That's where you got the courageous part as well.
Authenticity, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Cool. So I get one more question I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
was, what do you think is something that you're trying to, what's one thing that you're really proud of right now about yourself? And what's one thing that you're maybe trying to work on a little bit more? Or you say, oh, I think I could improve myself a little bit in this area.
Yeah, thank
Like
you.
not even like past couple weeks,
Uh,
like that.
so I'll start with the second question, which is the part. So definitely dealing with politics.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
I think this will never end. I mean, I admire people really skilled at that. Navigating politics requires certain savoir-faire and techniques. I find myself to be, I understand politics exists everywhere, right? It's just really something exists in any corporation, etc. So it's important to become aware of them. But I don't consider myself the expert in terms of how to strategize and how to deal with the politics. It's something that I find also mentally very, very tiring because I'm very focused in doing the right thing, the good thing. And so politics are often not more difficult to rationalize, and they come from also personal agendas that are not necessarily matching with the agenda and direction of the company. And that's really, it bothers me in the sense of we should be all on the same, we should have the same alignment in terms of what matters, what is important. But it's more difficult than it may seem. So, how to navigate politics is certainly one of my areas to continue to learn and practice. What am I proud of? Um, well, I recently, celebrated 1 year ago the 10-year anniversary with
Oh
Genentech
yeah.
and
Yeah.
Roche. And that was an important moment, just of feeling, wow, looking back, all the things I've done within the same company. I built the operational framework of the medical data hub. I parachuted myself in the real world data context, not knowing anything about big data and real world data. I built steering committees. I built leadership teams. I became a chief of staff to one of the most senior people within Roche. I interacted with the C-levels. I've been in very prestigious forums and workshops. And so that was a moment where sometimes the milestone reminds you to sort of look back. So there was very a moment where I was proud. But generally speaking, I think my journey in general, career is part of life, in my opinion. So to me, looking back and having the ability to build an international life and career is probably one of the things I'm the mostly proud of.
Mm. Yeah. I feel like it's important as well, like when you hit that like 10-year milestone or big milestones to appreciate the stuff you've done, like to not make sure it
Yeah,
goes unappreciated.
yeah. Obviously, there are things that are important to me, such as family. So going back to Italy every year or more than once a year is important. So I go back and obviously spend time with my parents and my family there. With my husband, we travel a lot, also internationally, which is great. It has been difficult, perhaps, to keep some of the hobbies. I used to be an horseback rider. I haven't practiced here in the US. Different, different ways of doing it. In my hometown, it was like a 5 minutes drive, and here it would be like an hour. So there are certain things, but there are so many things that actually came to me that I had no idea. And so, as I mentioned, like I've been traveling to so many countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Mexico, Hawaii, so many times, the US, Chicago, New York, Boston, Philadelphia. So I love that. And this is something I didn't plan, but I'm so happy that actually it happened.
Mm. And I can imagine as well, it must be nice whenever you get to, go back to your family in Italy and maybe through, do you have any opportunities through work when you'll be there for a little bit and then you'll
Yeah.
say hi and then come back?
Luckily, yes, luckily, I have to say the pandemic was also an important time because companies became more flexible.
Uh,
So since the pandemic, every time I go to Italy, I'm there maybe for 4 or 5 weeks, so I can work remotely there
mm,
and then take time for vacation and then come back to the US. Because going to Italy for just a week, it just you have no time to do
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
So the Genentech and Roche broader context allow you to actually work also from, in my case, from Europe. There are certain jobs that there are some legal restriction that I'm not familiar with, but as far as product development, it's possible.
Mm. And one last question I wanted to ask you was if you could tell yourself starting out at like one of your first jobs, so either at was it like Merrill Lynch, or
Yeah.
at, just coming out of college, uh,
Yes.
what
So,
what would you tell yourself? Yeah.
oh my goodness. So, there is a job before the one in Merrill Lynch
Okay.
because there is a moment where you can't put everything on your resume.
I got you.
So in the year December 12, 1999, I went to New York City. That was my very first intercontinental flight to the US, zero English. And so I landed in New York City and I wanted to study English. And so I enrolled for 3 months in a full immersion program for foreigners. So for 3 months, I was studying English, literally like 6 hours a day, Monday to Saturday. And I was on my own, so it was really intense. And the stars aligned, and it happens that the receptionist of my school for English for foreigners gave my name and resume to the general manager of a wine import company in Manhattan. They had their office in the Empire State Building. It was the
Oh,
35th floor. So, not kidding. 3 months after, so I completed my 3 months program in the school, and a month later, I joined this wine import company. It was called Prestige Wine Imports because they needed somebody who would basically help them in accounting, and it was fluent in Italian and French. So
um,
my very first job was in the Empire State Building, dealing with numbers and accounting for an import company. It was really surreal. It was like a movie. So what I would tell myself, keep dreaming and keep going on.
that's good advice. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that'll conclude the video part. Thank you so much, Liana.
Yeah,
I
of
really
course.
appreciate it. I think a lot of young people starting out their careers will really appreciate this, and people who are just already in their careers, for a long time. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on. And yeah,
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. Thank you.